India and China had held, in fact, talks, as we are getting to know now, on Tuesday. This was to avoid a breach of airspace. Talks were held in Ladakh. Senior officers were part of these talks. The talks focused on demarcating areas more clearly to avoid airspace violations. Let me go across to Vishnu for more details on this. Vishnu, what does this indicate? Was there any airspace violation to start with?
Well, the problem is just this. In many of the areas in Ladakh, because the line of actual control is not demarcated, there are differing perceptions of what is the line of actual control. So it's impossible to answer whether there was an actual violation of the line of actual control. In our interpretation, it may actually have happened. In the Chinese interpretation, it may not have happened. So the rule, by and large, is for fixed-wing aircraft, you need to maintain 10 kilometers away from the line of actual control or in that area. You don't really get close to it. What has been happening, and this is something the Air Chief has spoken about in the recent past as well, is that military aircraft from the Chinese side are coming close to the line of actual control. Now, if you breach 10 kilometers towards our perception of the line of actual control, it's actually flying time, which is just a few seconds. Now, when aircraft are actually approaching the line of actual control, and it's been happening a lot of late because the Chinese have built up infrastructure on their side, they've been having massive military exercises as well. When they do approach the line of actual control, the Indian Air Force scrambles its jets, it activates its systems. But the reason these talks were held in Ladakh, and it had the involvement of IAF officers, was to demarcate areas of confusion more clearly, so that there is no instance where there is some sort of confusion, where the Chinese get into areas where the Indian Air Force is involved in an aggressive scramble of their aircraft. There is a recognition that there is obviously a differing perception of what these areas are, which is why these talks were actually held. The talks were held on Tuesday, and the idea is there shouldn't be any repeat of a potential breach, and they should avoid a situation when aircraft from both sides actually come across. But just to end where I started off, if you were to ask, has there been a breach of the line of actual control, there is no clear answer there. I think it is safe to say that Chinese aircraft flew within 10 kilometers of that line of actual control. That perception of where that line is, it's different for India and China.
But Vishnu, even that perhaps would be seen as a threat, considering that we're already faced with a situation in eastern Ladakh and the friction continues for over 2 years now, isn't it?
It's all a threat. There's no two ways about it. If you've got military aircraft from China operating in close proximity to the line of actual control, on occasion, if they are flying within 10 kilometers of our perception of the line of actual control, if there has ever been an instance of them actually violating that, which triggers an Indian Air Force response, then, it does become a scary situation. But the Air Force has very clear orders. I mean, they have to engage. They have to protect our sovereignty, our integrity, our airspace. The question is, it's a very fine line between what constitutes an airspace violation and what doesn't, because none of these are deep incursions, and none of these, and it is no one's case that it is. But had the situation, or had there been a border there, had this or the LAC had been absolutely clear in terms of perception on where exactly it lies, then there could have been a more vigorous response if there was a breach of that. But because there's this element of confusion, it was important to actually have talks to thrash out, look, this is our perception, don't fly over here, because, then we end up scrambling aircraft, and nobody wants to have fighter aircraft in close proximity of each other.
Final question, Vishnu, and this is separate from the core commander level talks that have been continuing to ease out the situation in eastern Ladakh?
Yeah, that's right. It's different. And that's what makes this important. Usually you don't have Indian Air Force officers or senior Indian Air Force officers as part of those core commander level talks. By and large, on this occasion, there were Indian Air Force officers who were part of these talks. They took place in Ladakh, and they took place on Tuesday with the specific aim of demarcating areas more clearly, to sort out differences with the Chinese side, to avoid a situation of Chinese aircraft getting too close to what we perceive is Indian territory, or potentially even crossing over into our airspace. But the fact that it's not demarcated, the LAC, is what makes this potentially dangerous. and these talks are important in that regard.
Clearly. Vishnu, many thanks for joining us with all those details.